Well, here we are, about to fit the clutch plate. So I've assembled a flywheel 25 Newton meters. I'll set that up for you. There we go. Again, make sure all the threads are clean and dry because you're torquing this down and so on. If you're doing a complete engine out and you've got any reasons not be happy with the clutch, or even if you're not sure, I would change it systematically, because you know, engine out, engine in. Right, so now we can knit this down progressively, just making sure that this is nice. So that this is the drive shaft, the gearbox input shaft of some old bay or something like that, and it's always the same dimension as far as we're concerned for the clutch on these air cooled. And I know you can get a fancy multi thing, but basically I only do these. So right. 25. That's fine. So we just go around, just keep tightening up progressively, way the load is spread evenly. I get asked questions about what about lightening the flywheel and all the rest of it and so on. If you lighten the flywheel, you lower its inertial mass, which would be alright if you were building maybe a fast street buggy, you know, where you don't mind slipping the clutch. But this is going into about 1600 kilos of van, so really you don't want to be slipping the clutch, and you want the maximum amount of inertia to develop your torque for smoother driving. So that's my answer to that one. Fancy clutches? No such thing. Get a Fitchel and Sachs F and S. I know they're more expensive, but right, here we go. We can start torquing this up now. There we go. So that will fit in nicely. When you're fitting the engine into the gearbox and all the rest of it, put a little bit of grease on the, this is sticking out of your bell housing, put a bit of grease on it before you put the, as you're putting the engine in, makes it that little bit easier. Okay. Make sure your bottom studs are in good condition, with the threads in nice condition. Same thing eventually for your top bolts. This is my flywheel locker. There you are. 3mm thick, 50 by 35, and reinforcement welded in. Yeah. Okay, so make sure these are in good condition. Check that everything looks right. And now we can start looking at some more tinware. Oh, good afternoon everybody. As you can see, we're starting to get the tinware on. Right, yeah, the whole tinware is actually only held on with 2 screws either side at the moment, and the 4 nuts. Now I've stopped here, as it were, to show you a couple of tips and also answer a few questions. Right. When you're building the tinware back up, you've got to put in, you've already got this one in the bottom, all right, you've got to put this one in loosely, it will just hold, and it tucks in under this one, which is held here and here, right, and then you see it all lines up and there's all various more bits and pieces come. But the important thing is that this must be on the inside, but the end of it must be on the outside. Okay, the other side, same story. It's not actually held in, it's just you know, in place. Right, now then, when you want to fit the turbine, you have the plastic air seal, which has got 3 clippies on it, and you will find it very difficult to poke it into shape while putting the turbine on. So what I use is an electric hot air gun, and before I put it on I give it a good warm up and make it all nice and flexible, and then as you put it on, I use this as a lever just to sort of bring it all in and keep it up. You must have this in place. If you are doing a full rebuild on the engine, I have to have removed this nut, which is quite tricky because it's a slim fitting nut, able to remove the turbine support and get to the oil seal that is behind it, which is like a smaller version of the crankcase oil seal. But as this was done not that long ago, going through it all again. Right, so that's so fit that tinware, do this one. Oh yes, right, now the other question I have been asked on several occasions is about keeping the oil air cooler clean. And the question that is asked is it possible to move the tinware to get to the air cleaner? Now normally, obviously, there will be the front plate, which has to be jingled about, but if you undo the screws, you can in fact remove the tinware, and to be able to blow clean the oil air cooler and keep it clean inside the cylinders. Not so easy on the other side. So you'd have this in place on the engine, and you can lock it back down again. Obviously you've got to take all the electricals off, and you might want to remove the distributor because you've got the screws there. Okay, now the other thing is I fit the inlet manifolds and everything now, so don't forget that you must clean these, grease them with silicone grease to make sure there's no air leaks. And the reason I do the build like this, i.e. without the tin plate, is so that it makes it nothing's bolted down, it's just floating about, and that way you can get your heat risers and everything all lined up loosely. Don't forget to fit the gaskets, because you'll be taking it all off again. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to I only tilted this up so I could show you. I'm going to put this back on level ground and fit the heat exchangers. Now we've been preparing to assemble the heat exchangers and the inlet manifolds. So these flexibles here, put some silicone grease, them on. Each inlet manifold, just put enough of a nut on there so that you can really wiggle it about. Don't forget to put your gaskets, you know, gasket there, gasket there, gasket there, and eventually gasket here, each side. Also make sure that you have tapped out the threads all the way through, right? And then what I do to make life that little bit easier, and for the eventual removal of the thing, if you have to, is I put a little bit of copper grease on this little tool, and you just make sure it goes right down the hole like that. Okay, if you just put it on the thread, it just stays on the top and it doesn't sink all the way in, and then that will hopefully cause you less grief when it comes to fitting and removing eventually your heat exchangers. I use stainless steel nuts, front and rear, to avoid corrosion. There we go. Right, I will carry on doing the other side, and then I'll show you what we do from there. So that's this very loosely assembled, all slackened off, silicone greased to make it move easily in and out. We've copper greased the threads, we've tapped those, and now we can offer the heat exchanger on and just locate it with two nuts, just very loosely, don't forget the washers, and then we can line up for this gasket, which, if you've got heavily corroded feet and all the rest of it and so on, you might have to use a bit of goop, or I've even seen it go to having to use two gaskets. Okay, do that. Nut on. Just a couple of turns, no more. We're not fixing it down yet. Now you got to look. You see, this is where you need the wongle room, because it's with the tinware of the heat exchanger sticking out like this, it can get a bit tight when you're assembling. There we go. Right, now I wouldn't attach this yet. I'd put the rear one on next. Right, here we are, ready to put everything in position. Leave this on for the moment, because as you see, that's a bit deformed. We can trim that up later. Also, there often used to be a weld there, which you'll find is broken off, which allows you to slide that up there a little bit like that, and give you a little bit more wiggle room. There we are, just to get your nuts on. Again, stainless steel, you know, make a job of it. Right, so that's those two nuts in there, stainless steel, and you can use the advantage, you know, you can run the thing forwards and back a little bit to get better clearance on the nuts when you're doing them up. and so on, and get everything all nicely lined up, you know. Okay, on we go from front to back. Right, everything is loose, all the gaskets are in place, the studs are being copper greased, stainless steel nuts, everything is loose. You can, you know, move it around. Right, this has been lined up for the intake for the preheat and so on. That's been cleaned up to accept the gaskets. These are in place. You see there's only a very little amount holding the tinware in, and then on the front here we go, one nut there, one nut there, collar is in place, this is more or less in place. It's exactly the same the other side, but you know, slightly different. There's another gasket there, which they always forget in the kit, by the way. Same story here, that's all done, that's all done, that's all been greased up, that's all nice and easy. So the next thing to do will be to start knitting everything up, and then start aligning up the tinware and put in the front plate. Here we are fastening up all the rear tinware, so I thought I would show you this in a reasonable amount of detail. I'll just show you a few details. You see how you see it's flanged, you can see what fits over what. Now we can start to assemble this side. The foam is in place, this has been dressed, this has been got reasonably straight, so we can now put the top cover on for the oil cooler once everything is in place, and then we can look at the front plate. So. So that is now all the rear tinware on and pretty much tightened up. Okay, so now we're going to look at mounting the front tinware, but we'll do that a bit later because of the chains. Rubber bung is in, the little plate is in. These have been shrouded with aluminium. It's going to be covered with wide Scotch tape. Because I do not use the cold start or cold running flaps, and then we can start putting in the turbine. Now we're going to fit the turbine onto the shaft. There is a locating dowel here, which is here, and that lines up So I've put this is the mark that's in there, this is the notch that's in there, and this is my approximate aligning when it's at top dead center. Now it is a tight fit, but it will go in if your tin work is in good condition and you've got all the lumps and bumps out. There we are. You see, that will just fit there like that. That's it. It fits just correctly on the inside. Just put one bolt in here. There. Now we can nip everything up, and then you're going to have to check that as the engine turns over, it doesn't scrape anywhere. 13mm. Now we just tighten them down. Then you can use the 24mm socket here to turn the engine over and listen that there's no scrapings. Then with your flywheel locker you can now tighten these down. I would then torque them down 45 Newton meters. So, ready to fit the front plate. So I've had to dress up a bit, it was damaged. Starting to come together. You can use the bottom screws to help you to locate things a little bit. And again, same story here. There you go. Knit that one back into place, and then we can use that one and that one. There's nothing much left there, and then that one and that one to line up the back plate. So that's the back going into place. One difficult nut is this one down here. There, alright, which goes through 3 plates. 1, 2, 3. Once you get that lined up, then everything should be straightforward. So that's the ring into position. 2 here. One here underneath. That one, that one, that one. Make sure that the lugs are over the tinware, so it brings it up to the body of the box. Alright, another one. If you remember, there's a little horror to get at down there, which you get at from underneath. Right, that's this one here. And then you've got that one and that one. And that basically tinware on. You'll have to do some dressing. Look, it's all over the place, you know. There's always a bit of fettling to do, but as long as you get it as airtight as possible. So there we are, that's the front tin in place. Takes a bit of wongling here and there and a little bit of adjustment, we'll call it, because it's all been deformed with time. So now we can start looking at setting up the top end of the engine, carburetor, ignition, and so on. So here we are with the engine all built up. Carburetor is on, distributor is on, coil is on, alternator is on, drive belt. When you run the engine, you must have this pipe in place, otherwise you'll cook the heat exchanger. Right, pulley's done. Heavy duty scotch tape, there's 3M duct tape I think, to keep it airtight. Coming around here, we've blanked off the brake servo feed. This is the ready for the coil, and there we are. So there's no plugs in it yet, because what I do is I connect up an oil pressure gauge here, run the oil pressure gauge, connect that up, and then spin it over on the battery until I see oil pressure, so that everything is full. Then we can put the plugs in and connect up the fuel system. Connect up the fuel system, and then we'll turn it round, park it over there, and start it up. And then once it's started up, we'll have to look at in detail setting the ignition, and I might show it on different distributor setups. Okay, that's good for now.